Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm coming to you live from my audition setup. I just had an audition where I look like a goth chick. But I wanted to hop on here because I want to talk about, well, a lot of things. Over the last 6 months or so, I have been kind of figuring out what exactly I want to talk about with my content. I want to create a conversation around storytelling as a filmmaker, which is something that I do, as a tabletop role playing game player that I also do, and also as a LARPer, which is kind of something that marries all of my favorite hobbies together. Let's give you a little bit of history. So I started LARPing back in college. And I didn't realize it was LARPing at the time, but I attended Hofstra University and I was a core member and eventually e-board member of our Humans versus Zombies Club, which if you don't know what Humans versus Zombies is, it's basically a LARP where you simulate a zombie apocalypse for a determined amount of days. My campus did a week, other schools maybe do longer or shorter, etc. And there are also now adult groups as far as my awareness is. I haven't really partaken in that in a while, if that's the right way of saying that. I started LARPing in this Nerf club, and it was one of the greatest experiences. Because if you're unfamiliar, in a humans versus zombies game, you start off with a initial period of time where all players are just marked. They're all just humans. And you have one person who is the original zombie. And that person, for that beginning period, goes around and tags people completely on their own, trying to mask their identity and kind of sneak around and tag people without letting anybody know that they are the original zombie. Because if people find out, then they will avoid you. And that would be bad. There was one year that I was the original zombie. One day I'll talk about that. But for now, once you get through that initial period, you move into the next phase, which is where all of the remaining human players get to bring out Nerf guns and Nerf blasters, as we called them on school campuses, and have to defend themselves while partaking in usually optional, but the most fun part of the game, missions in which you are, depending on your game, furthering a story, trying to achieve a goal, just survive, whatever your goals are. It really made my college career. If there's one thing that I went to college, no, I'm kidding. But could you imagine? So that's where I started LARPing. And moving on from graduation and coming into this place where I realized I wanted to act and I wasn't just looking to study film to be a writer director, which is a revelation that I'll probably talk about at a later time. But for the sake of chronological story, I moved into working at a haunted house where I went with my friend to play zombies and get paid for it. And that felt very reminiscent of my college time because I spent so much of college playing that game. And then here I am post-college working at a haunted house, which I did for, I want to say 3 years. Shout out to Brighton Asylum, best haunted house in New Jersey by far. Definitely check them out. Anyway, moving on from that, I eventually started working at the New York Renaissance Fair where the LARP kind of continues. I went from simulating zombie apocalypses and playing the undead to now simulating the Renaissance and playing a drunkard. I was on the pub crawl. That's besides the point. But for as much as working at a Renaissance fair is this kind of theatrical experience of playing out, Shakespearean era, and depending on what your fair's narrative is, whether it is the Queen of England arriving or the Robin Hood tale or some other story that they come up with, it's a bunch of people coming together and LARPing. Like, working at a Renaissance fair is LARP the job. I eventually stopped working at the Renaissance Fair and I started attending LARPs. The first being Beakeline, which was definitely an experience, but a good experience nonetheless. I remember going there and feeling like, man, all of the people who work at the Renaissance Fair would love this, and they have no idea that this is just available. Granted, it's money going to the event and not towards you, but the pay was negligible at best, so it didn't really matter. Take it back to my college and going to the haunted house for the first time. it has always been for me about performing. It has always been for me about acting and stepping into the shoes of a character. And that's kind of what I want to address here. And I'm not saying that if you're going to attend a LARP, you have to be some kind of performer or storyteller or etc. However, I think if you are a performer or storyteller or etc., you're doing yourself a disservice by discrediting these events as ways that you can kind of fulfill these character experiences or improv narrative experiences. And then we get to now. This is like, what is it? Oh my God. Has it been there the whole time? So now we're getting to this next LARP that I'm attending in Austin, Texas, called Coven 1934. It is run by Jackalope LARP, which is a fantastic LARP organization that is led by Matt Stormcrow. Check out Matt's content. I will post the links in the description and whatever, but Matt is a fantastic person, and I'm very excited to be attending this LARP. But this one's interesting now because there's different kinds of LARPs, right? There are Nordic LARPs, which are a little bit more go with the flow, kind of reliant on everyone being actively engaged, and in time we kind of all agree that we're doing things. And then there are parlor LARPs where you're typically inside doing more political type storytelling and political navigating. You'll often see altercations dealt with rock, paper, scissors, which on a tie would defer to whoever has more points in whatever skill as the winner. And these are not the only options, by the way. There are plenty more. Of course, we have buffer LARPs, which is kind of like your more stereotypical LARP where you got people with phone swords coming at you or throwing little foam orbs, fireball, fireball, that whole thing, which is fun, okay? Don't knock it till you try it. Just saying. But regardless, there's plenty of different scenes and settings and genres and etc., all exploring different ways of navigating an improv story. And also, some LARPs, like particularly this one with Coven 1934, we're actually given characters, which I think is really cool. So everyone has been written an individual character with individual connections, goals, and abilities. And we are studying these characters to then perform them, to tell our story of these people who have been given to us in the way that we see fit. And I think there's something really cool about that. I mean, it's not something that I've experienced yet, and I'm definitely going to give my full review. I'm very excited to talk about it. And I expect nothing but the highest quality based on what I've seen and heard from this group before. But this is something special. At this point in time, when anyone is watching this first iteration, I should say, of Coven is not accessible. It's already cast and loaded up. But I want to put Jackalope LARP on your radar as a storyteller because these guys curate experience and narrative development for the people who attend. I will say it is an investment to commit time to one of these things, both financially as well as taking a weekend off or traveling to. For example, they host LARPs in Texas. I am in the New York area. We're taking a flight, you know what I mean? But regardless if it's this group or another group, if you're a storyteller, consider the opportunities that you have, maybe taking a character or narrative that you're working on and applying it to an event that you go to. And I have done that before, and it was very interesting. I took a character that I'm writing to a LARP where I played my villain as a means of exploring what their mindset actually was if I was standing in their shoes. And I wouldn't say I played them perfectly, but I learned a lot about why they take actions and why they don't do things. And that is really cool. Like, that's so fascinating. And of course, none of it is permanent. It doesn't necessarily nail any coffins and how you're defining your characters moving forward. But at the very least, you can kind of get inside their head a little bit deeper than if you were, say, sitting at a computer and typing away at what their actions are in your narrative. I don't know. Just something to think about. So that all being said, stay tuned. This is kind of a preamble to what I have going on, but I wanted to draw some attention to these concepts. And, what a better time to do it than having just LARPed for an audition, basically. Yeah, I could have changed, but I didn't. But yeah, let's give this a little call to action, right? Are you a LARPer? How do you feel having been able to explore your characters, OCs, whatever, in a live action space? Are you a storyteller? Have you LARPed before? And do you know what I'm talking about? Because you gotta know what I'm talking about. Are you an actor? Have you ever considered LARPing before? Or have you kind of written it off as some nerd garbage? Which nothing nerd is garbage, by the way. I don't think so, at least. Prove me wrong in the comments below. But yeah, I just kind of want to facilitate a place for these kinds of storytelling conversations. There's so many cool opportunities to explore narrative development beyond performance, but also in the sense of being able to step into the shoes of someone you're creating, you know? It's interesting. Anyway, that's kind of what my rant is for now. But thank you so much for watching. For those who don't know me, my name is Rachel Cordell. I'm an actress, producer, and a bunch of other things. Subscribe for more content like this, or if you feel like joining the conversation, or if you feel like supporting the independent media revolution, because all of that applies here. And yeah, I will see you next time for some other conversations. Stay tuned. Peace out. Bye, guys.